Welcome to episode 2 of Leading Questions. I'm Megan Mah.
I'm Kayla Theeuwen.
And I'm Sydorenko, and we're lawyers at WeirFoulds. If you joined us for episode 1, you know that Leading Questions is a web series where you ask and we answer everyday legal questions in a manageable format. And even though we're lawyers and we love to talk a lot, we're going to keep it short and sweet for you. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome.
So episode 2 features a number of associates from WeirFoulds, familiar faces if you joined us for episode 1, and we're here to answer pandemic-inspired questions. As we are now 3 months into this pandemic, we try to look at things that should be considered as we wade further into it and hopefully come out on the other side very soon.
In today's episode, our lawyers answer questions about real estate, estate planning, and home renovations. Let's get to it.
So the first question today is for Christina. A lot of people I know, my friends, family, are afraid that they won't be able to afford their mortgage. Do you have any suggestions on how they can handle this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this pandemic has left so many homeowners maybe without a job or with reduced pay and hours. And they, along with maybe those who bought a condo right before the pandemic hit, wondering how are they going to afford their mortgage. Thankfully, they might be eligible for mortgage payment deferral. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians are already taking advantage of this and have been deferring their mortgage payments since the pandemic started in March. Most of the big banks are allowing eligible borrowers to postpone mortgage payments for up to 6 months. So the deferral is basically an agreement between you and your bank where you both agree to pause or suspend your mortgage payments for a certain period of time. When the agreement ends, your mortgage returns to normal, and the missed amounts, including the principal and all accumulated interest, need to be repaid. So not mortgage forgiveness, payments aren't canceled, just added on at the end.
And to be clear, they can't just stop paying their mortgage payments. They still have to talk to their bank about it first?
Oh yeah, no, please don't just stop paying your mortgage. That's not what this means.
Okay.
You're definitely not automatically approved for this, nor is the 6-month deferral guaranteed. So please don't just assume to skip your payment this month. That's not going to go well. I think typically these deferrals are being granted on a case-by-case basis. Oh, also important to remember, interest does continue to accrue and will be added back to the outstanding balance of the mortgage. So what this could mean is higher mortgage payments at the end of the deferral period and overall higher interest charges over the term of the mortgage.
Okay, so I know that people are going to be concerned about the effect on their credit scores when they start deferring their payment. Is there any effect?
Well, it depends. I mean, a lot of these programs do come with the guarantee that the bank will not report a late or missed, a deferred payment as a missed or late payment, which would, of course, normally give your credit score a negative rating. Given that, this is definitely an unprecedented time, I know the banks are swamped with calls and requests. It would definitely be wise to get a commitment in writing from your bank that they're not going to report any deferred payments as missed or late payments. That way, if something does happen down the road and you see it show up on your credit report, you can go back and dispute it.
Okay, so the bottom line is that if you're participating in this program, you will likely pay more interest over the life of your mortgage.
Right, but
more?
Right, you might end up paying more, but if short-term cash flow is your priority, it's definitely a good option to look into.
That's fair.
Okay, so speaking of mortgages and home ownership, what happens if someone already made a down payment on a condo, but their financial situation has changed? I'm going to divert this one to Talia. What are their options?
So generally, when a deal is accepted, you can't really change your mind. If you do, and you decide to back out of the purchase agreement, the seller has to relist the property and sell it again. If the seller gets less money than you were going to pay, they can sue you for the difference plus any additional legal fees.
Okay, so that's why it's really important to structure the deal strategically.
Right. There are certain clauses that you should pay attention to. So there's 2 that I want to highlight. First, are financing clauses. These are very simple clauses and are standard in a lot of purchase agreements. And they basically say that the offer to buy the property is conditional on you being able to secure appropriate mortgage financing within a certain number of days. The other one is if you're buying a condo, Section 3 of the Condo Act allows all buyers to rescind their agreement of purchase and sale within 10 days of signing. It's called a cooling off period.
What if I've already entered the agreement, the cooling period's over? Am I just SOL?
Well, not necessarily. In all cases, there's a few options you can consider. One is assignment. So this means you can assign the purchase agreement to another interested party. Now, if this is a pre-construction condo that you're talking about, you have to look at the agreement carefully. not all pre-construction contracts allow you to assign a purchase agreement. However, lots of builders will allow you to do that, but you have to pay a fee to have that clause inserted into your contract. Another option is to extend your purchase agreement. So this is just an agreement made between the seller and the buyer to say that instead of closing on this day, we're going to close several weeks or months out. This allows the buyer and the seller some more wiggle room and some time to get their finances sorted out. Generally, failed transactions have to be worked out between the buyer and the seller, but given the current situation, we just recommend that all parties work together and try to make everything work for everyone involved.
That seems pretty reasonable. So there's another hot real estate topic, rent relief. Alex, is there such a thing?
So currently, unfortunately, there is no rent relief specifically provided to residential tenants with respect to COVID-19, although the Ontario government is trying to push the federal government to do so. The government does have existing rental relief programs in place, but these are geared towards low-income housing and individuals or affordable housing.
So what about maybe talking to your landlord?
Yeah, so it's likely that landlords are aware of the potential for substantial vacancy losses during this time, and they will want to ensure that you remain as a tenant, if they like you as a tenant, that is. You can ask your landlord to do two things. First, you can ask your landlord to enter into a repayment plan or agreement where the recovery of rental arrears owing is extended over several months. You can offer to extend your lease in return as incentive. It is important to note, though, that landlords cannot charge interest fees or penalties for late rent payments under the Residential Tenancies Act, so make sure the landlord does not try to sneak these penalties into the agreement. Second, you can ask your landlord for a rent discount or reduction. Again, you can offer to extend your lease in return. This option is a little bit more limited under the Residential Tenancies Act. While landlords may offer any kinds of discounts they want, the Residential Tenancies Act has rules about what kinds of discounts can be offered and for what amounts if a landlord wishes to apply a future government-mandated rent increase, which are the yearly guideline rent increases you are probably familiar with and dread, to the previous full amount of rent. So if the landlord doesn't want to apply to limit their ability to apply the yearly rent increase to the original non-discounted amount of rent, they will want to follow the Residential Tenancies Act. If they don't, future increases would be based on the lower discounted rent or some other amount. The rules for figuring out this other amount are extremely complicated, though, and this would be beneficial to you, but the landlord probably would not want to give up this right. Given this, the discount landlords may use that is prescribed under the Residential Tenancies Act is the rule that permits up to 8 months of monthly discounts, provided the total amount of the discount does not exceed 1 month's rent. So a total of 1 month's discount given over 8 months, essentially. Another possibility is up to 3 months of free rent, but this discount must be provided in the form of a rent-free period. There are other permitted discounts under the Residential Tenancies Act, however, they are more nuanced.
Okay, so it sounds like the takeaway point is, and my mom always used to say this, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, exactly. So next question for Kartika. I have some specific construction work planned at, my condo or my cottage. Can the work actually continue, or are there any special obligations that I have towards the construction workers or the contractors kind of coming into my place?
Yeah, so luckily, as of May 20th, there's no need to stop building your dream home because of the pandemic. All construction, including residential construction, is allowed to proceed in Ontario. But the pandemic does mean that if you're a homeowner, you probably have a more acute obligation to provide or maintain a clean work site. That could include your home. So generally, you should be aware of all the requirements you hear about on TV. You should have a hand washing station or a washroom available and provide either soap or alcohol-based sanitizing solution to your workers. You may also need to ensure, either by doing this yourself or making sure your contractors are doing this, that the work site and all of the commonly touched surfaces are sanitized frequently and that all garbage or waste bins are emptied regularly and safely.
Wait, so how do I know whether something's my responsibility or my contractor's responsibility?
Yeah, great point. So you should always check your contract to determine what is your responsibility versus your contractor's. It's going to be different if you hired all your trades directly compared to if you hired a general contractor who then hired trades. With physical distancing, you have an obligation to limit how many people are going to be on the site at one time. So if you've contracted with various trades directly as the owner,
then you may need to turn your mind to scheduling, to staggering the start times or the working times of the working days of certain trades, and even coordinating deliveries appropriately and at particular times. With deliveries, you may want to consider having clearly identified delivery zones, and this might be a good time to sanitize and get rid of that stash of pens that you keep in your junk drawer if signatures are still required for deliveries.
That's definitely something that's still on my to-do list 3 months into this pandemic. But what if I still plan on living in my place while the renos are going on?
Yeah, so if you and your family are still occupying the home, it's just really important to have clear space boundaries, have a dedicated washroom for the crew, and make sure that the crew doesn't enter the areas that you're occupying, and make sure you and your family stay out of the renovation zone even after hours. Keep in mind that the restrictions just generally might mean extended durations for some projects as well, including later end dates. So you should keep this in mind when you're negotiating your contract with your contractor or the trades, and into planning when you're going to be throwing your next dinner party.
Oh boy, so as if renovations weren't stressful enough, now we have all these other things to think about. Okay, well the next question is for Claire. Do I or my family need a power of attorney during a pandemic?
Yeah, so a power of attorney, for people who might not know, is a document that allows you to appoint someone to make decisions on your behalf if you're still alive, but if you've become mentally incapable. And this applies if you are permanently incapable by, say, a degenerative disease, or if you're temporarily incapable, say, due to an extended hospitalization. So it's not a really fun thing to turn your mind to, but everyone should know that there are two types of powers of attorney. So there's one that's a power of attorney for property, and this allows you to pick someone to make decisions on your behalf to do with your property. So your money, your home, any other element of your finances, and it allows that person to make spending decisions on your behalf. The other type of power of attorney is the power of attorney for care. So this is someone who makes decisions on your behalf for healthcare. So this is really important in times like these because they'll be making decisions about what kind of personal care workers you might employ, where you're living, what your medical needs are, and it's also the person that would be making serious end-of-life decisions if those arose for you. So it's important to have each of these types of powers of attorney because mental incapacity is not something that we like to think about, and it's often something that we don't think will happen to us.
But do we really need one? Like, really?
Yes, I would say that you do, because if you don't have a power of attorney and, gosh forbid, you do become mentally incapable, you're leaving your family in a really tough position because they then have to make a court application, which is called a guardianship application, on your behalf and ask to be appointed the person who makes decisions for you. So unfortunately, this is a pretty long and expensive process. And because you're no longer in a position to decide who's going to make decisions for you, you're no longer in control of who might make a guardianship application on your behalf. So I know these are some serious thoughts, and luckily it doesn't seem that COVID increases the likelihood of incapacity, but I do know from speaking with friends and family that this is a time where people are really taking stock of their life and making important decisions. And something that you want to add to that decision list is who you are going to appoint in a power of attorney to make those types of decisions for you.
Mm-hmm. So what about wills? I mean, although I plan to live forever, should I be considering updating mine? Cecile, what are your thoughts?
Ada, I also plan to live forever. But in all seriousness, absolutely, now is the time. You're at home right now, I'm at home. You know, you should take this time in quarantine to ensure that all your affairs are in order, like Claire said, to perform an honest assessment of your assets, your debts, and your intentions. This is so important, especially if you're in the high-risk category for COVID-19, like being over the age of 60 or immunocompromised. The cost of not having a will is really great. You're not able to leave your estate to who you want. You can't appoint the person in charge of distributing that estate. You can't choose the guardians to take care of your minor children. And at the end of the day, your family is going to spend more money and more time to settle your affairs. So do you want to leave them in that position? I think in order to figure out whether you should have a will, you should ask yourself, would I be satisfied with what would happen if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I didn't have one? If you die without a will, then your estate is going to be distributed in accordance with what some call the government will, which is provided for in a piece of legislation called the Succession Law Reform Act.
So is that the one that works depending on your next of kin?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, if you have a spouse and no issue meaning children or grandchildren, then your spouse will get your estate. But if you have a spouse and one child, for example, and more than $200,000 in assets, then that first $200,000 would go to your spouse, and then the spouse and the child will split the balance 50-50. So it's pretty arbitrary. You get the idea. The legislation spells it all out. So the thing to remember is that if you aren't comfortable with the government will as it pertains to your situation, then it's important to have a will to make your intentions clear. This is going to not only provide for your dependents, but also prevent litigation and conflict from among your family members after your death. That's all from me.
Awesome. Thanks for all the answers, ladies. And that brings us to the end of episode 2. Thanks everyone for joining us today. As always, if you've got questions for us that you'd like us to answer or banter about, you can email us at leadingquestions@weirfoulds.com. See you next time.